Thank you for joining us at the Cybersecurity Summit. I'm Kristin Judge, the president and founder of the Cybercrime Support Network. Our mission is to serve individuals and small businesses impacted by cybercrime, helping them report, recover, and reinforce their security. So please check out fraudsupport.org if you need help with recovering from a cyber incident. And then we all have a booth here. Each of the people on the screen you see, our companies are represented by a booth. So make sure to stop by and see us after we're done with the discussion here today. And right now I'm going to ask each of our speakers to introduce themselves. And I'm going to start with Mark.
Hi, how's it going? Thanks for having me. Mark Ostrowski, head up engineering for Checkpoint for the East Coast. And it's been a very busy year with cybercrime and attacks. So looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you. Renee.
Hi, I'm Renee Tarun. I'm Deputy CISO at Fortinet. Looking forward to a great conversation because, as we all know, the insider threat is one of the hardest threats to protect and mitigate against.
And ever growing, I think. Ben, thank you.
Hi, everybody. Ben Smith with RSA. RSA's been around for about 40 years. I've only been here for about 11 years, but we're still very active in the security, fraud, and risk management space. And just to echo what we've already heard, insider threat is a huge topic. Happy to be participating.
Thank you. David.
Yeah, hi, I'm Dave Telehowski at Austrowski. I'm Principal Security Architect, really focused on how we secure identity and access management for our customers. So also great to be here and looking forward to it.
Thank you. Wolf?
Hello, thanks for having me. Wolfgang Goerlich. I am the advisory CISO for Dual Security. Dual Security provides secure and adaptive access for the workforce. And of course, you know, insider threat, that's right in the walls, it's right in the workforce, it's right in our wheelhouse.
Thank you. Matthew.
Hey, Matthew Gardiner from Mimecast. I'm a principal security strategist. We focus on security and resilience services, probably best known for email. And definitely insider threats, big issue. Why do you think attackers socially engineer? They're trying to take advantage of your insiders. And then of course you have malicious ones as well.
Great, thank you so much. All right, let's get right down to the first question. I'm going to start with Wolfgang. How do you identify potential malicious users before there's an attack? And then how do you defend against them?
I think part of the challenge is, so long the answer to that has been, oh, we just put into place a good perimeter and we watch what's on our network and everything should be fine. But as we know, organizations today have around 1,400 cloud apps. So how do you extend the perimeter to all those different things? I think the trick is moving up the stack, looking at authentication and looking for indicators of risk, either on the person or on the device, the time of day, where they're coming from, looking for those indicators and stopping that connection before they get too far.
Thank you. David, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with Wolfgang there. I think defending against malicious users really starts with strong authentication and authorization. Identity is commonly called the new security perimeter. So continuously securing that identity of every user is really your first line of defense. It's a central part of a zero trust strategy to prevent unauthorized access. And here at Auth0, we safeguard over 4.5 billion logins every month. And that's something where we have a big data set that we can analyze real time. We can provide a risk assessment for each and every login. And if that risk is too high and we think it's a suspicious behavior, we can choose to do step-up authentication or multi-factor or block it completely. And so as that threat landscape constantly evolves, that kind of adaptive security control is really what helps prevent this type of malicious behavior.
Thank you. Ben, your thoughts?
I'll give you a technical answer and quickly a process answer, Kristin. The technical answer is, and we've already touched on this, things like attribute-based access control, paying attention to context, what that user is trying to accomplish, what system he or she is trying to touch, monitoring that, making decisions off of that. That's a good technical answer. UEBA, we could talk about maybe a little later, falls into that category. From a process perspective, super important, because the question was, how do I identify malicious users before there's an attack? Talk to your HR team. If your security teams, your risk management teams, and your human resources are not all on the same page, HR sometimes has information about folks who are leaving or about to leave the organization that can help you shut down an attack before it happens.
Great point. Renee, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with some of my panel members. I think from looking at it from a technology perspective, you're really looking for those user and entity behavior analytics, looking for things like unauthorized use of IT resources and applications, unauthorized transfers of data, misuse and abuse of malicious behavior, like, misusing admin rights. And so that's really leveraging, technologies like user and entity-based analytics, leveraging things like least privileges, data loss prevention strategies, network segmentation, as well as MFA. But I also think it's also more than just the technical aspects. Prevention's that critical first step, and like we said, engaging HR. I think the technical solutions are only half the answer. It's really also creating and maintaining attractive working conditions that'll prevent malicious behavior. So making sure that employees are feeling good about their jobs, not only just from a salary perspective, but also feeling that they're part of the organization, that they're valued and appreciated for the organization.
Yeah, that can be overlooked so easily. Mark, would you finish this question out for us?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, these are all really, really good points. I'll kind of piggyback a little bit on what David said. I mean, zero trust is a great sort of foundation, right, to kind of create the least amount of access somebody needs, so that if some issue does arise, that it can be contained. And then even, building upon what Wolf said, relative to the cloud and misconfigurations and things like that, like you have to really think about the zero trust and how you're granting access to your insider users, not just for one specific area, but across the entire infrastructure. And I think that, coupled with education, is a really good start to identify insider threat.
Yeah, great point. Wolf, I'm going to ask you this next question, if you don't mind. How do you detect malicious threats once they've occurred? And then what do you do to mitigate the damage they cause?
I want to pull up something that Ben said, because I thought it was so insightful. It begins with talking with HR and really knowing what's driving the concerns, right? If people are unhappy or there's M&A issues going on, we need to step up our programs. The next thing is you really can't overlook the strength of bread and butter controls thresholds. I had an insider when I was a security officer many years ago who was concerned they're going to lose their job. We knew about it from HR. And then we watched as they tried to download all the files off our servers onto their computer. And needless to say, hit several thresholds, raised several alerts. That's not something that needs machine learning. That's not something that needs a lot of technology behind it. That's something that needs good process and good detection.
Thank you so much. And Matthew, I'm going to ask you now, not all insider threat is malicious. So how do you identify areas where an unintentional insider threat may occur and then prevent that human error from causing a breach?
Yeah, I would say that actually most insider threats are not malicious. We have to remember, you don't know until you investigate to figure out what the root cause was, or whether the person was complicit or not. You obviously have compromised users, credentials, unless you're using multi-factor, which you absolutely should, everyone should be using for everything. Many don't. So it's very easy to compromise a credential and become that person, so to speak. And then you have lots of careless actions. People are not malicious. They're just sending stuff they shouldn't, or taking stuff, or not realizing they're putting things on Dropbox that are sensitive or whatever. So at the end of the day, you don't know whether it's intentional or unintentional. You just need to have the preventive controls and the detective capabilities and the investigative to get to the bottom of it, if you will. And so I think that's an important thing, is a lot of the controls you don't need to know. If you're looking for malicious content or sensitive content going the wrong place, the first thing you don't need to know why. You just need to know that's happening. Then you figure out why. And so
right. If there's going to be a breach, there's going to be a breach. It doesn't matter if someone had a malicious intent or not, the breach happens, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, good point. So Mark, we're going to come back to you on this next question first here. What more can be done to raise the bar on the level of knowledge employees should have on their safe behavior? Because we just established they can be the insider threat.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'll kind of retouch upon, I think education is so important here, right? And I think we all have plans on how to educate our users and what potential actions they have can cause some of the leak of information and things like that. But as far as raising the bar, having an ability to automate, like I mentioned, like before, misconfigurations or policies, and being part of the pipeline of software development is a huge piece that helps raise that bar beyond just education. And I think lastly, from a technical perspective, having systems that can move beyond just logs, right? Looking at machine learning and deep learning type attributes helps kind of do some of that predictive analysis that perhaps would raise the bar from just generic, situations and things you have in place.
Thank you. Wolfgang, your thoughts?
I think we also need to go beyond training to a more of a collaborative approach, right? Nudging our folks towards making the right choices. When you think about zero trust, if you're going to evaluate who I am, awesome. You're going to evaluate the computer I'm using to access the resource, great. You're going to evaluate, whatever I'm using as my factor, awesome. When you do all those things, giving a nudge, giving a notice, working with the users collaboratively so they update, so they maintain, so they make sure those devices stay within the policy and have good hygiene. I think that's vital. And frankly, it's about the only way I remember to update my my browser half the time is that little notice that says, "Nice try, Wolf. Please patch first."
Great, David.
So I think it's really important, first of all, to have a security first culture. And that really means that every employee prioritizes security. They share a joint responsibility to protect themselves, the company, and each other. And at Auth0, we care really deeply about making the internet safer. And we have dedicated team members that focus on increasing security awareness, not only with employees, but in the online community as well. We have education and training internally, but as part of National Cybersecurity Awareness Month this October, we also hosted a series of online community events. We had some experts come in as well and publish a lot of social media content, just how to educate folks and highlight best practices, safe online behavior. It's really something where we have a goal to empower people and empower our employees to make good security decisions. Make sure everyone feels supported to say something if they see something suspicious too. Just to work together to make sure we keep each other safe online.
Yeah, I appreciate all the work you've done in October. Maybe we can partner sometime. Ben, how about you?
Yeah, Kristin, I think the one thing I would add to all these great points is, in my mind anyway, there's a critical distinction between security awareness and changing security behavior, which really should be the goal of your security awareness program. And behaviors are tough. They're ingrained. There's a reason that people act the way they do. There's a reason I act the way I do on my corporate network. There's a reason I act the way I do on my home network as well. So when we advise organizations around their awareness programs, especially those that are trying to up the bar, to your question, to try and encourage or incent that behavior, we like to point out that there is no on-off switch in everybody's brain that changes their fundamental behavior between work and home. The most successful security awareness programs I know I've seen are those that try to approach these employees holistically as the human beings that we all are. And in fact, those human beings are typically very appreciative if they get advice and help in terms of how they can make their own home setup more secure and more safe.
Yeah, good cyber hygiene is good at home, it's good at work, it's good at school, it's the same stuff, there's no secret. Yeah, great. Renee, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, often, our employees are our first line of defense and our best line of defense in a lot of cases, especially with a lot of the employees now working from home. And I think, what David said, it's creating that culture of security. I mean, everyone has a role to play within the organization. And so that security awareness is critical, especially when you look at today's environment. A lot of employees weren't necessarily prepared to work from home and what that meant to work securely outside the office. So that security awareness training is critical. Hence why we opened up our network security expert training free to the end of the year, because we saw such an important need of that security awareness training. And it doesn't necessarily have to be classes. I mean, it can be continuous informal, bulletins and communications with your workforce throughout the year. Doing things like phish testing and gamification, to really encourage employees to be prepared, so when the adversary comes calling, they know what to do. And in most cases, people want to do the right thing, but it also means making sure that they understand what the policies and expectations are within the organization of what that safe online behavior means. And then knowing what to do when they suspect that there's an incident, who and when they should be reporting these incidents to, I think are all critical factors in helping that, awareness campaign.
Yeah, and knowing where to go should be a part of the onboarding process, and then be reminded over and over so people know, because day one, they could have something come through that they need to report. Great point. And Matthew, would you finish this question out for us?
Yeah, I mean, to add maybe a little more gravitas to it, I think of them as our last line of defense. So if they get by the, hopefully your technical controls have stopped the issue before it even gets to the person, but if it hasn't, they're part of your layered security strategy. The good news is I remember 20 years ago when I started in security, there was no security awareness training that I ever saw. It was all about endpoint this and firewall that and identity management, which is where I started. That's changed. The vast majority of companies do something. The problem is with many companies is it's not the right something. It's the, you're in danger of hitting your head on the desk kind of training when you take it. You do it once a year and you don't want to do it. The YouTube generation, Instagram, whatever you want to think of it, we're all now part of that, even those of us have been at it for a while. We consume content, we get trained up, we get our opinions and behaviors changed in a different way. And taking an hour-long thing from like a lawyer is not it. So we think nuggetized training, built for the YouTube generation, engaging, entertaining, and education at the same time, basically gamifying it, if you will, is the way. And we've seen definitely you can get behavior change by doing training, but doing it in the more modern right way.
I'm going to use nuggetize. That's what I've been looking for. Is you just can't have people sit and sit and sit.
5 minutes.
I love that.
Has
I love
to be
it.
5
Yep.
minutes or less.
Well, yeah, I mean, remember the Vine was 6 seconds, and this is all people, our younger people in our lives, like 6 seconds is their attention span. Yeah, great points. All right, so this question is for David. We'll start with you. With the recent election and holiday season fast approaching, we're living a little bit of a different time right now. What are some of the most imminent threats that companies should be aware of, and how can they prepare themselves?
Yeah, so companies should definitely expect to see increased malicious activity online through the holiday season, especially with the pandemic that's going on. So I'd like to highlight 2 imminent threats. The first, ransomware attacks, and the second one is distributed denial of service attacks. So let's start with malware and ransomware attacks. 3 U.S. government agencies just yesterday issued a notice, a joint advisory, that there's imminent attacks on U.S. hospitals and healthcare providers. But every company should take note of this. In this case, it's TrickBot malware. It leads to ransomware attacks like Ryuk, and it can also lead to data theft, financial theft, credential harvesting. So this very serious, and it can completely disrupt your business. So to prepare, you need business continuity planning, so you can make sure you can recover if you are attacked. You need to be regularly backing up your data safely online, and implement a recovery plan where this data is stored safely in another location. User awareness, as we just talked about, is also crucial. Any user is a vector. They could be a recipient of a targeted attack, and they are the last line of defense there. So employees need to know who to contact if something happens. On the distributed denial of service front, these attacks are going to increase, and you really need to proactively manage your capacity, plan to scale, and make sure that you have the rate limiting in place for your applications that are online. You also may want to consider incident response drills, tabletop exercises, so that you know how you're going to handle it if something does happen. Just during this time, you have to be vigilant and continually monitor for threats. Make sure you're doing it. You do have people online watching what's going on to just stay safe. That's very important.
Yeah, thank you for that. And Mark, did you want to join in on this one too? You're on mute.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, just to emphasize what David talked about. I mean, in just last quarter, we saw that there's a 50% increase in ransomware just in general, quarter to quarter. So I mean, that's obviously a very notable increase. And then I would just say that most of those start with phishing. So I think Renee mentioned, right, having a strong anti-phish program and things like that are a big part of it, because a lot of it starts with phishing. So if you're going to spend any time doing anything, it's really tightening up your phishing capabilities and anti-phishing capabilities.
Yeah, exactly. We've got to make sure that people understand what's coming in their inboxes. The criminals are getting better and better at doing profiles of us online and then sending something that sounds really encouraging for us to want to click on. So, all right, this one is for Ben. Ben, how can my existing SIM platform help me uncover insider threats within an organization?
I think we've had a lot of productive conversation around not just the awareness point we've hit a couple of times, Kristin, but around the importance of identity and especially around insider threat. But we don't necessarily have to install new technologies, new solutions. Most organizations today have some sort of a SIEM, Security Information Event Management platform. Hopefully it is not a legacy SIEM platform that is just focused on logs. When we talk to our customers and our prospects, we're very big on the concept of holistic visibility into your environment. So that's logs, that's packets, That's net flow if you've got data centers. That's even endpoint information. Lots of vendors today are talking about XDR as the next big thing in capabilities. There's a lot of great data that can be collected by your, let's call it your evolved or your enhanced SIM, if it's doing more than logs, that can help you directly inform and influence the decisions you need to make, especially around these insider threats. A lot of these tools may even have a UEBA. Renee touched on it. I mentioned it as well earlier, user entity behavior analysis. May have that capability so you can create a baseline. How do I know what is abnormal behavior if I don't know what normal behavior looks like? Well, sometimes it's a UEBA capability that can help you get to the answer to that question and throw a spotlight if that abnormal behavior suddenly appears.
Thank you. Matthew, would you like to join in on this also?
Yeah, I'd like to pivot it a little bit to, we haven't talked about cloud-based security controls. Cloud security controls are moving to the cloud, probably no secret to anyone listening to this, whether it's identity management, authentication, single sign-on, email, web security, even SIMs themselves are, cloud-based increasingly. And SIMs are all about integration. If you don't have the data, you can't analyze it, you can't, investigate. So one of the things I just want to make sure people think about as they're moving their security controls to the cloud, integration becomes even more critical, I would say. And so don't forget that. It's not like you're not trying to rebuild these silos up in the cloud that you work so hard to integrate to your SIMs on premises. You need to be able to take threat information from all your security controls, increasingly cloud-based ones, and feed them into monitoring systems, which are increasingly cloud-based themselves.
Thank you. Wolf, your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, and when it comes to insider threat, the scenario I mentioned earlier, we caught that in our SIM, right? We caught that with good rules and good detection. There's a lot of very exciting developments happening in the AI ML space. There's a lot of good things to talk about in behavior analytics. But what I think it's important is to realize that, there's a really good chunk of things that we can catch with good data collection, that we can catch with good correlation, that we can catch with good rules. And I'd even argue that it's that well-functioning SIM that enables us to then, feed the delta, the rest of that, into these machine learning algorithms to address our residual risk. So I am a big proponent of the technology because I think when done right, it can really surface and catch a lot of things very quickly.
Thank you. Mark, finish this question up for us.
Yeah, I'll finish it up. And Wolf, you stole my thunder, but I'll I'll try to add a little bit more. But yeah, we see the same things, right? And I'll emphasize again that looking at logs these days is certainly something that's still important. But taking advantage of the algorithms and taking advantage of things like that can be more predictive is a huge advantage. And there's obviously a huge cost associated to unlabeled data and be able to apply that human capital to make good decisions. And that's really where, machine learning comes into play. It offloads some of the reliance on human capital and gives a little bit more coverage, if things are done in a correct manner. So I definitely feel that, that any SIM platform or any type of logging that you do, the more you can fine tune and use machine learning to get to a better result is certainly a huge assistance, especially with just the sheer amount of malicious traffic that's going on right now.
Thank you. This question is for Renee. How can deception technologies help us to thwart off malicious insiders?
Yeah, deception helps address the two-pronged approach to breach protection by redirecting both the external and internal threats away from critical assets. The theory behind deception technology, it's simple. It's creating tripwire decoys on your network disguised as data assets. They can alert an organization when they've been accessed. Essentially, it lures the bad actors away from the actual valuable data while exposing their presence, often without their knowledge. This gives the security professionals time to engage in forensics analysis in real time by closely monitoring their patterns, their activities, and techniques to discover the breach devices and exploited vulnerabilities. If a rogue employee, starts poking around a network for information that they're not authorized to access, deception technologies is one of the most effective ways to catch them. And, the next generation, deception technologies differs from detection-based honeypots because it also includes tools such as threat analytics, as well as integration with other security controls, to proactively, block attacks before any real damage can be inflicted.
Thank you. Ben, your thoughts on this question?
One of my favorite neighbors here in the neighborhood, Kristin, has 4 legs, little Jack Russell Terrier who lives across the street. She's very aggressive whenever the UPS guy shows up in his big brown truck, barking, making noises. But someday that dog is going to have the opportunity to maybe be outside and catch that truck, and that dog's not going to know what to do at that point. So the moral of this story and how it relates to deception is deception, to Renee's great points, fantastic technology. It's a kind of an extra layer, a great way to try and get better visibility into who some of your adversaries are. But please don't deploy that technology until you have a plan as to what you're going to do when you capture someone inside your environment. And this is, again, not technical advice. This is legal advice. There are other things that you want to think about. If you're building a trap for somebody, be thinking about what you're going to do when that trap is actually hit.
Good point. Thank you. This next question, I'm going to start with Matthew. How does the mass movement to work from home due to the pandemic change things right now? How is malicious activity changing in frequency and sophistication amid the COVID-19 pandemic?
It's definitely made the hard harder. People listening to this, I don't know if you track the IDC PC shipment quarter to quarter, but I have been, and it's up double digits year over year. No secret as to why, because there are a lot of PCs being slammed out in an emergency mode, or at least, maybe over the past few months. And our work, our survey work that we've been doing, surprise, surprise, the world of personal and business has blurred further. We knew it was blurred. It's blurred way further. And of course, again, surprise, surprise, attackers have pivoted to the biggest global event in our lifetime. Christmas is big, but not around the world. Thanksgiving is big, but only in certain countries. But COVID is big everywhere, and so I don't need to explain that. So for 2 weeks after the pandemic was declared, 60,000 plus domains were registered related to COVID or Corona. We know that newly registered domains are suspect just in and of themselves. The attackers obviously pivot their social engineering. They pivot their motivation, get money, click here, open this document to get money or find out critical information. And now your people are probably less protected unless you were well prepared and were ready for 100% remote work. Their personal life, they're doing everything personal on their corporate issued device that's brand new. They're loading software. I mean, it's a little scary.
On and on, doesn't it? Yeah. Thank you. David, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so just to add to what Matthew said, I mean, COVID-19 accelerated remote work and digital transformation in such a sudden and dramatic way. This really has shifted cybersecurity priorities, right, to handle the needs of now you have a workforce that's fully remote. And then there's new tools that need to get put in place, maybe layers of protections like MFA that really becomes mandatory in this type of environment. We've seen high-profile ransomware attacks on companies like Garmin, Carlson, Wagonlit, and then there's been social engineering attacks on Twitter. Just a few examples of some high-profile and highly sophisticated attacks that have occurred. We touched on this earlier. There's some spear phishing attacks that have really increased with COVID-19 themes, trying to social engineer users that are at home looking to get assistance from the government or their local city, state, or for their small business. So attackers are trying to take advantage of that. And as the threat landscape continues to evolve, this is really the new normal that we're going to be in for quite some time as the pandemic continues. So I don't see it changing anytime soon.
Yeah, thank you. Renee, finish this question up for us, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've seen a shift in the environment from a standpoint, kind of like David said, there's more social engineering, phishing attacks coming into our employees, and working remotely, they can't just simply walk down to the help desk to say is this legit, or pop their head over the cubicle wall and ask their neighbor, hey, is this legit? So again, that's where that education awareness comes into play. But also you may face from an insider sec, a malicious insider, a nefarious employee that may not necessarily do something inside the office, maybe a little bit more tempted when they're working from home with less oversight. And so also I think that the shift is changing because now you have more devices. Some of these devices may not be secured. connecting in from unsecure networks. So I think it's really focusing on some things like we said, like zero trust, multi-factor authentication, looking at network access control, and also protecting those endpoints. Those endpoints are often the first point of compromise. So putting on endpoint protection and as well as EDR solutions to really help keep some of those breaches away.
Yeah, and the number of endpoints is just increasing rapidly. I read a statistic there that we're getting 127 new IoT devices are hitting the internet per second worldwide. So, endpoints are just growing faster than any of us can imagine, I think. So I want to ask Ben now a question. Are there any books you would recommend on the insider threat topic? What's your favorite that you've read?
Yeah, sure. And this is a double question, Kristin, because I get to take off my face. I'm going to take you over to my book cam very briefly,
Nice.
just to show you the answer to that question. The best $60 you can spend on this topic. Anybody in the audience who signed up for this panel interested in it, you can't go wrong with the Cert Guide to Insider Threats. It is dated. The research that it's based on is almost 20 years old at the outer edge, a little newer, maybe about 10 years ago. The book is about 8 years old. It is rock solid. Lots of good stories about real world insider threats, both intentional and unintentional. Some great numbers and great statistics to think about. It is this book that got me wise and smart around the whole concept of the most dangerous 60 days as it relates to insider threat. That's the 30 days before somebody has put in his or her notice, and it's the 30 days after that person has terminated. Goes all the way back, Kristin, to my first point about the importance of being a good partner with HR, because they typically have great context, great insight into that level of information. And
the Cybersecurity Summit does not just have talks; we have book cam. So just stay tuned here. Thank you so much. That's awesome. We've got to mix this up a little bit, right? All right. So Matthew, this question's for you. What about after the security incident has happened? Okay, so an insider threat was there. It happened. Now, what do you do next? How do you handle this?
Obviously, this is where your response or your investigation and response comes into play. And I think actually, thinking about it from the insider point of view provides a reasonable framework to build out your response plan in advance, ideally, not after the fact, where you have the compromised, which is obviously an outsider. So, you're going to have to investigate it, but you may also have to, like, when do you report it to the law enforcement? Have those decisions. When do you bring in your legal department, to guide your or your external law firm or whatever, if there's an actual breach. Then on the careless front, the framework is a little different. You've determined that it was a careless act, not malicious. Some way you figured out the person didn't mean to do it, but they violate a policy or they violate a good practice. That's where you want to in advance know, what are you going to do when you find that? Are you going to train them? Are you going to add more controls to their account, or think about it in advance, ideally. And then the final one, obviously, just to follow the logic, is malicious. So if you find someone's intentional, well, that's probably a firing offense. Again, legal, HR. You have it's not a technical issue after you've done the investigation. It's a human resource issue, maybe a law enforcement issue, depending on the issue. You have to decide whether you want the publicity or not of a law enforcement action. But the idea is, like any incident response plan, is think about the scenarios, plan out what you would do, get agreement amongst the functions, have a written policy, and then follow the policy and adjust it as you need to.
So you're not going to deal with an insider threat issue on your own. You got to bring in the other departments and work together as a team.
Definitely not security people, because we don't decide what to do.
Right.
About the
It's
business.
a lot more complex. Yeah, thank you. It's not just a security issue. David, last question here. Excuse me, Renee, I wanted you to chime in on that one too. I forgot.
Yeah, I agree. I think Matthew nailed it. In your incident response plan, you really need to have a playbook for the insider threat. And it's got to be one that's exercised before the actual event, because what a lot of people forget is kind of like what you mentioned, Kristin. How many more players are involved in that incident response process? A lot of people think, oh, it's just an IT and security problem, and that's simply just not the case. You're going to need your legal, you're going to need your corporate comms, and definitely you're going to need your HR in place. And you really need to work through that, because even when you're dealing with an insider, the way you collect and maintain, forensics related to that insider threats when you're collecting the evidence especially if you are going to go forward with legal actions. It really needs to have a well-documented process. And so those people that are involved in that investigation, really need to have that understanding and training of what that means.
Exactly. David, last question to you, and then we're going to have everybody wrap up. A reminder, if you want to keep talking to these great experts, you can go to their booth and continue the conversation after we're done here. So David, how does multi-factor authentication help defend against human errors and insider threats?
Yeah, so multi-factor auth is one of the most important ways to prevent unauthorized logins. It's really something we should all be using for every important account that we have. So requiring an additional factor of something you have, it's typically your smartphone, it helps to prevent a wide variety of attacks. That goes for credential stuffing, spear phishing, man-in-the-middle attacks. Even if your username and password are compromised, an attacker is not going to be able to log into your account. You're going to stay protected. You're going to be able to retain control of your account and reset your password. It's effective at preventing unauthorized logins, but it could also add a little bit of friction to the user login experience. With smartphones being ubiquitous, there's it's just a little bit of extra that's a reasonable trade-off for that added protection. And at Auth0, we actually make configuring MFA really straightforward for developers. The entire experience can be customized, maybe only for sensitive pieces of your application or sensitive operations. But it's all about being able to trust but verify your users and really protect against those insider attacks.
Yeah, thank you so much. So this has been a fantastic discussion. I'm sure the audience has gotten a lot out of it. I always learn something new. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to call on each of you. What are the parting words you'd like to leave the audience with? And we'll start with Mark.
Yeah, absolutely. Great dialogue back and forth. I'll piggyback on what Matthew said. Don't forget about the cloud. And also that this really corresponds well with the COVID-19 discussion, that there was a lot of quick accelerated moves to the cloud. And people often forget then to add the security on top of what they're doing, and the visibility and the compliance and all the things that we talked about in those new environments. So, definitely follow up and look at those new environments that you built out, during the pandemic.
Thank you, Renee.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's looking at some of the technology, putting them in place to help mitigate the insider threat, and doing things like zero trust, doing things like network segmentation, and user and entity-based analytics, but also not forgetting some of the personal elements about doing that training and awareness with your employees, but also creating that environment where it promotes good behavior from your workforce.
Yeah, I've had other people say sometimes, give prizes when people do something right. We can be bought with chocolate. Let's just say it out there, right? Ben, how about you?
Hopefully it's clear to everybody that insider threat is a technical challenge. It's a process challenge. If you don't have the expertise on staff to kind of put all these puzzle pieces together that we've thrown at you, come by the RSA booth. We'd be happy to talk to you about how we help customers like that every day.
Thank you. David.
Yeah, I think I would just say, you still have time in the holiday season. Take a look at how you're managing your identity, how your authentication authorization controls are, how you're doing two-factor auth and protecting yourselves from these types of attacks that can occur where your accounts can be compromised. So we got to stay safe out there and be vigilant, and also to have a plan in place if an attack does happen. How are you going to handle that? Tabletop it, plan it out.
Yeah. And enterprises need to know that the vendors are here to help. Call on your vendors, have them help you with a little bit more education or some tools that they may have to help get the point across. Thank you. And Wolfgang.
Yeah, post pandemic, we now live in a world that's 1440 square pixels surrounded by reality. It's important to keep in mind the context of our people. It's important to keep in mind the broader context of the world, those drivers that would lead to potential insider threat. But at the same time, technically, it's very important, vitally important, that we assess and reassess trust on every single connection, and that when things go awry, we raise a red flag either to cooperate with them or to investigate and close the risk.
Thank you. Matthew, you've got the last word.
I mean, I've found in my days in security that a lot of the capabilities are not used in services or products or software, that security products that customers have. So I think you can start with, think about the compromised, careless, and malicious framework. Apply the security controls to the best you can against those three buckets of bad activity, and then start looking at new controls you need to fill specific gaps. But the point is that there's a pretty good chance you have a lot of controls in-house that can be applied to the problem, and you'd only have to search for specialist tools, to fill gaps.
Use what you have. Thank you. This has been a great discussion. Thank you, Cybersecurity Summit, for having us. And please take some time to visit our booths. Thanks, everybody.